Alright guys, we're going to cover cruise clearances. This is kind of picking up where we left off from the last review video. We talked about VFR on top clearances, and the last one that I published on Moodle, this one's going to go over cruise clearances. A little less complex, but they kind of have some strange caveats to them that a lot of people get tripped up on check rides and on knowledge tests. So what it is, it's really, in all practical sense, a method that's used by air traffic controllers to reduce their workload. What it is a clearance that allows an aircraft to operate from the minimum safe IFR en route altitude up to the altitude that they specify in their clearance. You can kind of see in this small graphic here. So if this aircraft, November 216 Bravo Delta Cruise 8000, that aircraft can operate anywhere between the minimum en route altitude, okay, whether it be the MEA over here, the MEA crossing these mountains, the MEA down here, anywhere in between that minimum altitude, which will vary depending on where you're at geographically, all the way down to the destination airport. So it clears the aircraft to fly between those blocks of altitude to their destination and execute an approach of their choice. Now that can also include a visual approach, which if you remember we talked about briefly when we were going over instrument approach procedures. There's also, FYI on that topic, there's also going to be videos on Moodle that cover visual approaches and contact approaches if you need some review on that as well. So what you need to be able to explain from it is that a cruise clearance is really a clearance to do an approach at your destination airport. So when you're provided that by an air traffic controller, he or she is giving you a block of airspace that is totally yours to do with what you please. You can climb and descend all day, all night, whatever. So what it'll actually sound like, kind of like the VFR on top radio calls, it's very simple. November 700 Uniform Hotel, cruise 8,000 feet. This is something that they could give to you. You could request it on your own volition. Obviously, if they give it to you, you could deny it if you didn't request it in the first place. But it requires ATC to be able to provide you with a safe standard of separation in a very large area. So it's probably not something that you would ever get if you're in an area where there is a lot of traffic going on. Okay, now that can be a little confusing because, as I said earlier, it's primarily there for use of reducing the air traffic controller's workload. So if I have a controller who is just bogged down with all these people that are trying to get into LAX, and he's got one guy that's trying to get into some podunk airport 100 miles to the north that he's responsible for, he could give that aircraft a cruise clearance to get into the airport where he's going to. That way he doesn't have to deal with them and he can focus on the task at hand at LAX. So that would just be one example. So you can climb and descend at your discretion within your block, but you are responsible for determining, okay, where is the bottom of my block of altitude, because they're just going to give you a top. Now, again, this is kind of a point that I'll stress over and over again because it's something that people miss a lot. A cruise clearance does clear you to do an instrument approach at your planned destination. Okay, not necessarily at some other airport that you decide you want to go to randomly nearby. Okay, you're not going to hear cleared for the approach, practice, or cleared for the RNAV runway 19 or something like that. Okay, when you get that cruise clearance, cleared cruise 8,000, you are again free to climb and descend between that block of altitude, fly to an initial approach fix at the start of a published IAP, and then conduct the approach. Now, you are responsible for getting yourself to the initial approach fix and making sure that you are following the proper altitudes up to that point and following the proper altitudes that are published on the approach plate after that point. So the strange part that some people get tripped up on is, while you're free to climb and descend at your discretion, if you tell them that you're climbing or descending, you automatically have to stay at the altitude that you tell them you're going down to or climbing up to. Okay, you're not going to be able to descend or climb at your discretion after that without additional ATC clearance. It's a little strange, but that's just part of it. The reason why, in my mind, that's probably the case. Keep in mind, this is my opinion. Is if a pilot were to give an air traffic controller a report that they were descending with a cruise clearance, it's probably something really important, such as, hey, I'm descending because I've got a ton of icing on my wings, or I'm getting ice on my rotor blades. That's something that the air traffic controller would probably need to know about for the next 5 people that are coming in behind you. So that's just my theory. I don't know that for sure, but you can come up with your own explanation if you want. So why would one be issued? Again, we kind of already talked about it, but just to reiterate the points and finish this up, it's primarily made to reduce the controller's workload. You're only going to get this in sparsely populated areas with minimal traffic. Now, one thing that it is very useful for, we just kind of briefly mentioned this a second ago, was avoiding icing conditions. So if I'm on an IFR cross country, to wherever, and I think I'm at risk for icing conditions, a cruise clearance gives me a lot of freedom to climb and descend at my discretion as the conditions change and the freezing levels change as I go from one place to another. So that's something, kind of a scenario-based question that an examiner may ask you. What type of clearance could I ask for that could help me avoid icing conditions, or what are the benefits of a cruise clearance with respect to the weather? That may be a couple of examples of how an examiner might word that. But for that one, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you guys got any questions.